Let's begin with NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, business and data correspondent Brian Chung, and professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan, Justin Wolfers. Garrett, so is there progress with China or not?
I think it's unclear, Anna, but the signs point to no, if I were to shake my magic 8-ball on this. Where we are right now is you have the president saying repeatedly that there are some level of talks going on between the United States and China. Meanwhile, his Treasury Secretary, his top economic advisor, and the Chinese say that's not true. So while there may be kind of a narrow, technically accurate way to say that at some level, there are always conversations ongoing between the two largest economies in the world. There's no particular indication that any of those conversations are leading anywhere that will end in the tariffs being lowered. And that's really what this is all about. The White House is very keen to show progress across the board, that they're getting somewhere by using these tariffs as a negotiating tactic. And the Chinese, for their part, are saying that may be true, but you're not getting anywhere with us.
Brian, the markets keep spiking and then they're sinking, all based on these impromptu comments that we keep hearing from President Trump, comments that at the end of the day end up being flip-flopped or walked back. Any sign Wall Street's going to stop engaging in what appears to be a kind of a boy who cried wolf scenario?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, when you have a market that is as sensitive as any time you even hear progress on talks happening, that's certainly not good for markets, because the idea as an investor is you want certainty. You want to know that an investment that you're going to make today is going to pay out in a month, going to pay out in a year, going to pay out in 10 years. And the problem is that even companies can't forecast what they're going to be making in the quarters coming up because of this tariff uncertainty. They don't know what the policies are going to be, let alone tomorrow. They don't even know what it's going to be in the next hour. So you have the likes of American Airlines that's pulling their 2025 outlook. PepsiCo announced that they would be cutting their annual profit forecast. So they offered a forecast but said it's going to be lower. United Airlines a few weeks ago saying, you know what, we don't even know what the outcomes are here. Let's have two different scenarios for what our revenue and what our business is going to look like in the coming months. So again, this is not an environment that's filled with any certainty. Investors are reflecting that. That's the reason why markets remain volatile. Although I want to point out today in early trading, for the first 30 minutes at least, it seems like things are relatively mixed across markets. It's a quieter Wall Street day than I'm used to seeing as of the last few weeks.
We started the show, things were in the green, but as we were just now talking, things have taken a dip, at least in the Dow, so we don't know
higher
where
on the
things
S&P, but
are going to end.
Anything could happen.
Well, and you talk about how things have been changing day to day, or in some cases hour by hour. In some cases, Justin, it could be minute by minute. I just want to recap all the mixed messages on China in the last 24 hours. First, yesterday morning, the Treasury Secretary said, quote, both sides are waiting to speak to the other. Well, then, shortly after that, President Trump said this.
Are you talking to them actively now?
Actively. Everything's active.
Has there been any direct contact between the U.S. and China trade at all?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And
every day.
Well, then, last night, Trump's economic director, he contradicted what we just heard from the president. Listen.
The president will announce when talks happen, if they happen. But it's clear that the president and our team are open to talks. The Chinese have signaled that they're open to talks.
Then just this morning, China says any claims about negotiations happening are unfounded. Justin, what is the impact of all this? Not just the immediate impact, but longer term, too.
Look, it's amazing. I'm an economist. I've been following this closely. And if you ask me where tariff negotiations are between the two great superpowers of the global economy, my answer is not only do I not know, but different people in the White House are saying different things. It makes it impossible. Look, first of all, for businesses, we rely on China for all sorts of inputs into our own production. They rely on us as well. It makes it hard for mums and dads at home. I was talking to a friend the other day who needs a new air conditioner, and he said, should I wait? Well, tariffs are 145%, and the president said that's about to change, so you should wait. But then the president said that maybe it won't change. And then the press secretary said it definitely won't change. No one knows what's going on, mate.
Exactly. No one knows. But one thing we do know is that there's a lot of uncertainty. There is already some damage being done. People are losing their retirements. Businesses are starting to turn away product. President Trump has already admitted 145% tariff rate is so high that China basically isn't doing business with the U.S. right now. Take a listen.
I haven't brought it down. I haven't brought it still 145. I haven't brought it down. I said it's a high tariff. It is a high tariff, but I haven't brought it down. It basically means China's not doing any business with us, essentially, because it's a very high number. So when you add that to the price of a product, a lot of those products aren't going to sell.
Brian, talk to us more about how Americans are already feeling the impact.
Well, I mean, I think Justin just hit on it, right? I mean, people that are trying to make decisions like buying an air conditioner are having to watch the White House press conference to see whether or not the policies are such that they should try to buy it now or try to wait. And I think that that is just another layer of uncertainty that is very much similar to what Wall Street and a lot of these C-suite offices are facing as well. But I do think to kind of loop back to an earlier question that you had about whether or not markets are willing to engage in this boy who cried wolf game. I do think, though, that there's a fair point to be made about the tail wagging the dog in this scenario, because, yes, it is indeed the case that, Wall Street has been really, really whipsawing off of what we've been seeing out of Washington, D.C. But at the same time, it was the bond markets that appeared to maybe convince the president to pare back on those so-called reciprocal tariffs during those, discussions a few weeks ago, and maybe even suggest that the conversations with the retail executives of Home Depot, Target, and Walmart earlier this week, maybe convinced them to also dial down the rhetoric specifically on China, given that so many of those retailers source from China. But I do think the question here is, can negotiations be had? I think another interesting thread here is that a lot of diplomats are in Washington, D.C. right now for those IMF meetings. So it's not that you really even need to get on a plane going all the way to Beijing to have conversations. There are people right up on K Street right now to have those conversations. So the door is open. That's what the Chinese government has said. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said this over and over again. The door is open if the U.S. wants to talk. The question is the United States, to put this in relationship terms, in the talking stage? We don't know.
Well, let's talk to Garrett about who they're talking to, because we heard from the White House press secretary in the last couple of days that there are some 18 written offers or proposals that have been presented. Do we know which countries and how far along they are?
I can't say with a cool Australian accent, but I'm going to put "no one knows what's going on, mate" on like a sign I can hold up to answer questions like these, because the White House is not being forthcoming about that kind of information, perhaps not wanting to raise expectations that they will get 18 trade deals. They're not saying who these countries are who have, they say, submitted these written offers. I think the countries that we know that there are serious trade negotiations going on with, really the two big ones are India and Japan. Obviously, the vice president was just in India. The president had hosted both leaders of those countries here at the White House before these so-called reciprocal tariffs went into effect. And I think that's why those negotiations are at more of an advanced stage than perhaps the other 16 to 18 that might have submitted some kind of offer, because there were already discussions happening. Now those discussions take on a greater urgency. But those are really the only two I can point to with any specificity and say, we know that there are specific issues being discussed by the right people to ultimately get to new trade deals.
Justin, speaking of that cool Australian accent, I do want to get some sound in here. This is with mega donor Ken Griffin. Here's what he said about Trump's trade actions yesterday.
The United States was more than just a nation. It's a brand. It's a universal brand. It was like an aspiration for most of the world. And we're eroding that brand right now.
Justin, we know President Trump cares a lot about branding and image. What's happening to the U.S. economic brand right now?
Look, let me tell you a story of a young kid growing up in Australia. I used to watch a lot of sport. I love sport. And whenever the Olympics are on, if there was an Australian, I'd cheer for the Aussie. But me and all my mates, if there wasn't an Aussie in the race, we'd cheer for an American. And this is not just a statement about sports. This is, Ken Griffin was right, it's a statement about aspiration. This was a country that people all around the world looked at and saw opportunity and amazing things going on. And we've lost that. Young Aussie kids don't cheer for the Americans anymore. To give a much starker example, after Trump threatened to take over Canada, he might have thought it was a joke. But if someone threatens to take over your country, it's not funny. They put billions of dollars into defense. Their relationship with the United States is forever wounded. And we can go a step further. Now, one of the things that really makes me angry here is the simple loss of credibility. Nothing that the White House says one day is true again the next day. Fair enough, it's good TV. But if we have an economic crisis, the real problem is we're going to have to rely on a Treasury Secretary being able to walk out and say, it's all right, folks, I can calm markets, we've got your back, this is what we're doing. But if he's already used up his full quota of lies for the year, he's not going to have that ability, and we're going to be prone to being to all sorts of economic shocks.
There's the chaos happening outside the White House, and now we're learning of some chaos inside as well. Garrett, we have this reporting that Elon Musk and Treasury Secretary Bessent had a shouting match in the West Wing over who should run the IRS. What can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right. This took place about a week ago and happened in a hallway near the Oval Office, the two going back and forth about the person who had then been tapped to lead the IRS. The IRS has had something like 4 different acting heads already in the Trump administration. It's been a bit of a hot potato. Bessent and Elon Musk disagreeing in that moment. The White House has since tried to put a positive spin on this, calling the disagreements a normal part of any healthy policy process. You know, this is a president who has liked, really throughout his public career, having his advisors fight and disagree and may the best idea win. And that seems to be the way the White House is casting this shouting match between Scott Bessent and Elon Musk from last week.
Garrett Haake, Brian Chung, and Justin Wolfers, thank you all so much. Appreciate it.